Hey guys, this is a Forex price action trading course. This is lesson number 6, how to use trend lines for clarity. Alright. Okay, here's a lesson overview. First, I'll be showing the Euro-USD monthly chart without trend lines. And I want to demonstrate how it looks completely random and chaotic, and how there is no usable information to gather from a chart without trend lines. And then I'll go on to draw trend lines on the Euro-USD chart to show you how trend lines can add clarity and perspective to a chart. Okay, let's get going. Alright, randomness and chaos. Okay, without trend lines, a currency pair's price looks completely random and chaotic, as if there's no reason for its movements. Okay, this is a Euro-USD monthly chart. The data spans from the year 2000 until the current, which is 2021. Now, if you examine this chart without trend lines, it looks completely random and chaotic, truly as if there's no meaning for these movements. Okay, because from 2000, price pretty much just went up. And then in 2008 through 2014, price pretty much just ranged with a slight bias down. And then in 2014, price fell. And then until the current, price is just ranging again with a slight bias up. So these movements seem completely random and chaotic. Okay, so let's read the rest of that text. Okay, so a chart without trend lines does not tell us anything useful in trading. So as traders, what we want to derive in terms of information is first and foremost going to be the information of the future direction of price. But then we also want to know what's happening currently right now. And furthermore, we want information of past price also, because past price does show characteristics as well as tendencies of a currency pair. However, without trend lines, none of that information is derivable. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay, trend lines provide clarity and perspective. Okay, so trend lines provide an overall view of what a currency pair has been doing and what it's doing currently. It provides clarity to an otherwise random chart. Okay, so let me show you an example of this. Okay, I'll be drawing these trend lines ahead of time. Now, one trend line is from this pivot to this pivot right here and extend it out into the future. Another one's from this pivot to this pivot and extend this one too. And then finally, this pivot to this pivot right here. Extend that one too. Now I'll be using these 3 trend lines to demonstrate how it can provide clarity and perspective to this chart. So beginning from the year 2000, we could see that price was in a strong uptrend. Then price pulled back, and at this point, it started respecting this trend line multiple times. And after it respected it multiple times, it continued this uptrend until 2008. And then in 2008, price fell very strongly. Now the key point here is that price broke out of this strong upward trend line right here. Now at this point, after this breakout of this strong upward trend line, many people started to become indecisive of the trend of this currency pair. And thus, price began to range for 6 years from 2008 to 2014. So many people were not sure if this long trend was over or not. And that all started from this breakout of this long trend line. Okay, and then in 2014, price began its descent very strongly. Now at this point, I'm sure many people viewed this long trend to be over and a short trend beginning. So as price pulled back from 2014 to 2018, many were viewing this downward trend line as a possible entry point for that long-term short trade. Thus, in 2018, there were many respects of this downward trend line, and price began its descent again. So at this point, all the people that are short are very happy, right? However, in 2019, price began to respect this upward trend line very nicely and got rejected back up. But up to this point right here, since this downward trend line was still intact, I'm sure many thought this downward trend was still intact. However, Literally about 8 months ago, this strong downward trend line, starting way back from 2008, was broken out. Now at this point, since this downward trend line was broken out, I'm sure many people throughout the world are tending to be long biased again. Thinking since this downward trend line right here from 2008 being such a strong level, but still being broken out, many will view this that this downward trend is over and a new long trend is beginning. Okay? So literally just drawing 3 trend lines provides clarity and perspective to an otherwise random chart. Okay, let's go on to the remainder of that text. Alright, moreover, it tells the story of a currency pair, which in turn tells us the pair's tendencies and possibly the direction of future price. Okay, so it told us the story of this currency pair, which was from 2000 to 2008, many people were long biased. However, this strong trend line being broken out right here turned many people off from being long. Thus, from 2008 to 2014, half those people became sellers. Thus, it became a range, which made this second trend line right here from this pivot to this pivot. Then in 2014, price fell very hard, prompting a lot of traders to view this pair as long-term short. So as price pulled back all the way to 2018, many people enter short again on this downward trend line from way back here, right? Many tests right here. However, in 2019, this final trend line from this pivot to this pivot got respected again with many contact points. So I'm sure many of the players that were short were frustrated at this point. However, even as price pulled back, up until this point, those short players are still short bias. However, 8 months ago, there was a breakout of this downward trend line starting from 2008. That's over 10 years. So when this trend line was broken out, all the short players started to question their positions short and started reverting their long-term positions as long. Right? So it tells us the story of a currency pair, literally with 3 trend lines. Moreover, trend lines could show us the characteristics of a currency pair. So what we notice is that the Euro-USD currency pair on the long-term charts have very obvious trend lines. And when those trend lines are broken out, it really affects the overall bias, whether long or short. Again, some currency pairs' characteristics are not like that. Even if these long-term trend lines are broken out, it doesn't really affect the overall balance of the shorts and longs. Moreover, this trend line down from this pivot to this pivot is respected very nicely. These long-term trend lines, as well as this one right here. This trend line from this pivot to this pivot. These long-term trend lines on the Euro-USD currency pair are very well respected and paid attention to by many players. Moreover, another characteristic of this currency pair could be this: that when price is in a trend and it wants to reverse direction, typically it ranges and then changes its direction. And that's not true for all currency pairs. Some currency pairs just go up and the trend changes abruptly and goes straight down without this range. And you could see that on the shorter time frames too, right? This area right here. A short trend, ranges, and then reverses direction. Okay, and finally, trend lines could possibly show the future direction of price. Because knowing that this currency pair has the price characteristic of these major long-term trend lines, when they're broken out, it has a tremendous effect in the direction of its price. Now, considering that this downward trend line is obviously the most prominent of all 3 trend lines, and that trend line being broken out roughly 8 months ago, that shows a possibility of the future direction of price being long. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Alright, so that was it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to go over how to use trend lines for projections. Okay, trend lines for projections differ from trend lines for clarity in the sense that it is forward-looking. It only has interest in future price, whereas trend lines for clarity focus more on past price. Okay? Okay, so we'll get into that in the next lesson. Again, if you have any questions about this lesson, please leave it in the comments. And thanks for watching, guys. Okay, bye.